on this third session, we will hear the client's perspective. I think automation and RPA has gone from this hyped up magical tool to a reality in a very short span of time. And many of our clients and clients in this room have implemented RPA tools, and there are quite a few learnings that they would like to share. And it's going to be a panel discussion. Anupam Govil, who is a partner with Avasant, is going to lead it. So I'll invite Anupam on stage to come and kick it off.
Thank you, Nikhil. So I'd like to invite my fellow panelists on the stage as well. So walking on here is Donald Mones with MUFG Union Bank. He's a director there, manages, I guess, vendor risk within the organization. To his left is Abhishek Breja. Until recently, he was heading the Enterprise Transformation Office and the AI Center of Excellence for Assurant. And then to my immediate left is Bert Mullen. He is VP at Equifax and responsible for their global BPO sourcing. So we're going to dive into an interesting panel discussion today, but I want to start off with a couple of context-setting slides first. The previous two sessions, I think, have set the stage very well in terms of not just what is automation, but what impact is it having across organizations. In this session today, we're going to hopefully dive a little bit deeper in terms of how our organizations actually building the roadmap for automation and implementing automation and scaling automation across the enterprise. And answer some critical questions around how do you actually go about building that roadmap, what are the different elements, what are some of the operational risks, and what are some of the operating models. So to start with, I think the opening presenter, Mukund, did allude to this, the fact that we look at automation as a journey and not a destination. And by that, what we mean is that automation is one of the fundamental building blocks right now for a digital enterprise. Essentially, it's helping organizations create the digital operating model on top of which they can either pivot their business, they can move into the digital world and better compete. Automation's immediate impact, especially from an RPA perspective, is on bringing more efficiencies, bringing cost savings, faster time turnaround. I think the greater impact is yet to come, and we're starting to see at least some early signs of it. And as you can see on that slide, as the journey matures and you have more sophisticated technologies and business models seep in, we're going to start seeing the impact move from right now the tactical processes towards more core functions and even revenue generating business models. And that's automation combined with analytics, machine learning, cognitive, and AI will truly start bringing about a significant change in how organizations operate. And the broader overarching trend, of course, is that of creating this digital workforce of the future, where, as the tagline says, taking the robot out of the human. We're going to have this blended workforce where, human talent will work alongside, robotic talent to really perform processes not just better, but make better decisions and enable the flow of intelligent information across the entire value chain of the enterprise, from supply chain right up to the front office. So to me, that's really automation, and we're starting to see that come alive. So this slide just provides a little bit of a perspective of how some organizations are going about building this roadmap. Every journey needs a roadmap, and so does automation. So essentially, moving from initially doing the sort of the proof of concept towards creating a more sustainable model where you created governance and standards, you're choosing the right operating model, the right partners, and then eventually getting into the scale mode, where you have to ensure that automation is something, first of all, that's accepted across the enterprise, because there is a huge cultural shift as well that has to happen. At the end of the day, it's an OCM initiative, a change management initiative. So the organization as a whole has to be on board. So communication is key. Reskilling is very important. So again, we talked about setting up a COE, creating this automation pipeline, communicating across the enterprise. Those are some of the things that are required to scale the initiative. And finally, as you get into the high end of that value curve, innovation is what the focus shifts to, right? How can you leverage some of the other aspects of automation to truly drive value? And at the end of it, I fundamentally believe that, every organization has what I call operational lethargy. And what automation does is actually unshackle the latent potential in the organization to unleash its true potential and to unleash its true talent. So we're moving toward this world of what I call software-defined processes, and automation is the enabler for that. So with that, get into real conversation with these people who've actually been doing this on the ground. I'm going to start off with maybe with Bert first, and then Abhishek and Donald, and have their initial views on where do they see this journey going? What do they see from their perspective the end goal or objective of automation?
So, thanks, Anupam. I think it's definitely a journey for us, and we've chosen, we've been on this kind of RPA path for about 12 months, but it's not just RPA, it's about automation. We've chosen to start with RPA, start with our back office processes, typically simpler to get your hands around. Front office processes will come within the next 12 months or so, but all of our IT folks have been consumed with transforming our business and making huge investments in technology. And our operations teams, typically want to improve their processes, and they get put at the end of the line in terms of IT spend and priorities. And RPA was the perfect solution to provide them a tool to automate our processes without getting in the way of IT. RPA for us is driven by operations. IT is there as an enabler by providing hardware and infrastructure. And so, I would say start with a strategy, put a team of key stakeholders together. I do believe in the COE concept, but I would advise against jumping in the middle of AI to start with, but start small, move fast, and learn quickly.
Thank you, Bert. Abhishek, what's your view on this?
I broadly agree with what's been said, but I do think start small but start bold. So I would say do tap into AI while you're doing RPA, because what we have seen is if you take a process and do RPA alone, it may give you 30-40% savings. In some processes that are very good candidate, maybe a little bit more, but then you don't have a big ROI, and that's what a lot of companies are doing. Take proof of concept on processes that are slam dunk, right? But the problem with that is you're eliminating 0.5 FTE, and it doesn't have a good business case. So we believe, and we've done this when I was with Assurant. We took a medium complexity process where we are eliminating 15 to 20 FTEs. And yes, there is true elimination of work. So when you do that, if you do RPA alone for a complex process, it will give you 30-40%, but when you add a little bit of AI, and I'm not talking about the Watson type AI, which is very complex AI, but some very simple AI for classification, for clustering, so using some basic machine learning stuff, some OCR, you know, you get to like 70-80%. But you also need to also have a design thinking for changing your process. Sometimes you just have a bad process. And if you're just trying to automate a bad process, you won't get a very good result. So that's one, I would say, you know, an opinion that I have, and been successful in that, what we have implemented. The other thing I would say is AI has to be democratized. Of course, there needs to be a COE. The way I was envisioning this, and the whole mission and vision that was set up for the COE was on the lines of how GE did Six Sigma. You know, where that should become part of everybody's thought process. It is easy for an operations person who's been running the operations in claims or back office in their respective areas for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years to understand the basics of AI in a 2-day to 3-day kind of workshop than it is for me or anybody to understand their operations well enough. So I would say democratize AI, because AI will be omnipresent. You said where is it going? That's where it's going. It will be everywhere to varying degree. In some cases, as your last slide showed, it would be a AI first kind of a product, or a AI, you know, AI first kind of a service. In others, it could be AI enabled or RPA enabled. But it will be in every aspect of business, there will be elements of AI. It will be omnipresent.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, your point of view is obviously that we should bring some element of AI.
Yeah.
I think Bert, you were talking about maybe start off with the initial automation, get that out of the way, get buy-in, and then bring in these more advanced elements. But at the end of the day, I think it's about setting the right expectations, right? So that is the key here, whichever path or roadmap you choose, right? Donald, you're a bit of a contrarian, so maybe you'll turn into this.
Well, and I do. For those that know me, I came from the outsourcing side, offshore outsourcing. So I think it's not a field of dreams. You can't build RPA, build a COE, and expect people to follow. So the leverage that I look at is the vendors that we've selected in our environment, and ask them where can they automate and where can they drive efficiencies, and almost teach our company where the opportunities are. So we built the COE, we have a product in place, but now I'm turning and saying to our vendors, now what are you going to do for me using an automated platform? And if I was going to spend $1 million, how can I get it to 800,000? It used to be the fact that they would just do labor arbitrage, right? We'll bring you in freshers, we'll bring you in less educated people to learn the process, and the answer is no. You know, the answer is going to be robotics, and it has to be part of every activity that we do today. I think a lot of the legacy organizations have a really hard time changing the internal DNA. We can change our vendors' DNA very quickly. I mean, you heard about Wipro today, but every large company now is providing these kind of services. So my goal is to find those vendors that have those that are currently involved and force them to do the robotics. The other side of my day is risk management. I mean, I used to do outsourcing, and now I do risk management. So when I'm looking at how do I mitigate risk and how do I speak to regulators in our second and third line auditor groups, RPA is an easy answer, right? I could produce reports to show them efficiencies. But they have to change the way they look at it today. You know, they asked me to fill out a form today. I said, I don't want to fill out a form today. I want an automatic generate of an output. So I think there's a lot of aspects to robotics that are not just building a COE, not just saying I'm going to use Blue Prism or I'm going to use a product. It's changing the vendors' activities and how they integrate with us internally. And I think that's a key factor going forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we'll get into that question later in terms of how can you build that partner ecosystem and get value from it. But my next question to you, Bert, is around what do you see as the ideal starting point for this journey of automation? Where would you typically start, either from your example or what you think industry best practice may be?
Well, the situation we were in, we had operations folks, finance folks, people across the enterprise playing with automation, playing with RPA, doing proof of concepts here, there, and everywhere with different providers, somewhat like the Wild West. And then we also had third-party providers bring on their own solutions of RPA and building stuff or partnering with software companies. And for us, it was about we need to develop a model that's sustainable, put the proper governance in place, leverage best practices, and we chose one RPA tool that seemed to best fit most of our requirements, and then start pushing that out across the enterprise. And you know, we got buy-in from our COO and CFO immediately, especially our CFO. When he saw that we could deliver some things for him very quickly, he became a big fan and helped us push this initiative across the enterprise. So get key buy-in from your stakeholders and get your arms around the landscape, and then you can start doing heat maps and priority assessments and figure out where you want to spend your resources, get some quick wins, develop some some demand from the operations to come to your center of excellence and start working together to prioritize.
Yeah, so the first step, as you're saying, is really about crawling these wild horses of shadow automation across the enterprise and set some ground rules and bring about some cohesive coordination. So Abhishek, what's your view on the right or the ideal starting point for this journey?
I think every organization has a different culture, different kind of state that they're in. So I don't know if there is one right place to start for everyone. There are some basic hygiene factors that have to be taken care of. You need to have some kind of controllership in this centralized governance organization, but I would suggest don't centralize it to a point where people see it as you're creating your own empire and kind of you're removing them from that whole process. The purpose of the centralized group should be just about making sure that there is visibility and there is a centralized area where some prioritization methodology is used. So we were very, very structured in the way we formed our centralized group that I was leading. We had a lot of participants coming from businesses giving us their opportunities. We had a robotic viability assessment methodology. We score everything, and so all that was there. But some of the more subtle things that we did was we went after those processes that were not too small, so that our initial saving is meaningful. We've seen many organizations, as I said before, going after like processes that are very, very small just to show the functionality of the tool. We did a little bit more than that. And the reason we did that was so that the ROI, our company right now is very much cost saving focused. So that's just to, for that reason. And we also went after processes that were outsourced, so that we don't have fear of internal people saying, well, you're taking away our jobs. And the thing is, I've been in this operational transformation for a long time, and we used to use standard list of things for outsourcing viability. Is it rule-based? Is it digital? Can it be, access from remotely? The same criteria are now used for RPA. So whatever is your outsourcing total spend, you can take a crack at that and say that this much of it we're going to automate. And a rule of thumb is, your cost of a bot is going to be 1/4 to 1/3 of what even if you have a really good contract on your FTE cost offshore. So that's where we went after first. And our vendor that was outsourcing it, I think this was one of the questions asked before, we said, can you just automate this? And they said, yeah. For like 6 months they were just dilly-dallying because they didn't want to cannibalize their revenue. And it's a major vendor. So we asked the other vendor, all right, you have been asking that you want to get into this area, do this automation for free, and if you show us that the result, we will pay you after the fact, and then you can, you're in. And they did a fantastic job. And this other vendor came to us and saying, well, why did you do it to us? Because we could have done it. Oh, no, you waited for 6 months, you didn't do anything. Yeah. Oh, I give you a chance. That is the other vendor. You automate their process. So we are having these vendors automate each other's processes. And they're really aggressive about it because they're saying, look, we are so much smarter than that other vendor about their process, not our process. But now they've got the message. So now they've started doing it to themselves because they know if they don't, then we will do it to them.
Yeah. But you touched upon a very interesting point before, which I'm going to ask Bert about this 1:1 correlation between replacing an FT with a bot, and hence you get whatever 70, 80, 90% saving. But that's not necessarily true, which I think, Bert, you're seeing, where there's a lot of fixed upfront costs. There's cost of governance. There's other associated costs, right? So what are you seeing in terms of ROI when you started the journey versus what you're now seeing in real terms? How are you seeing that ROI pan out?
Well, it is project specific. And as you get into more complex work efforts, you're going to have to invest more up front, and it's going to take more time. Plus, you've got to have a plan in place for managing the processes afterwards. So if, the rule of thumb for me and probably for our CFO, if we can pay it back in a year, then that's at least something we want to dig deeper into, right? And RPA, generally, it's much quicker than that. So I don't know. I'd say 30% is a pretty good kind of baseline, but you need to look at it over the course of 2 or 3 years.
Right, and figure out the total cost and then figure out,
Right.
But I think people get hung up on the ROI, ROE about savings because there's so many other benefits to automating a process. And the answer I have is if I find a process that is low complexity, very transactional, and well documented, there's really no issue. It goes to robotics. But the issue is that there's so many other downstream benefits. I mean, attrition, like we may not eliminate staff, we may reallocate them, right?
Yeah.
We may put them into higher value. And way back, in the day, when people used to be at a help desk doing password resets, you wanted to get them out of password resets and you want to move them to account administration. So I think that's a lot of the issue. So when people come to me and say, robotics is going to replace, 5 million jobs, well, they're going to be retooled. And, I was talking to someone last night and they said, the Ford, right? The Ford car. When they automated the assembly line, were a lot of people going to be put out of jobs? Yes, but did they find other areas to go to? So I think it's important that the people that are impacted, not replaced by robotics, are retrained for other things. And I think Capgemini had an announcement a couple weeks ago that they're retraining 40,000 employees to be involved with robotics. More companies need to make that announcement. That's going to help us as a buyer and provider of services internally to be able to implement RPA more rapidly.
And one of the things is that's where RPA, people are going to lose jobs. And I'm a little bit more pessimist about that. This automation and AI is just another revolution. People will find new job, not necessarily. This is like going to create a lot of people out of job. But when we used to do outsourcing and tell people that, look, we have some retention bonuses for you, that was the only motivation. Here, the motivation is a much different one. What we have done is we did workshops across the company. I led those workshops and I did those workshops and explained people, what can be done. There was so much excitement about people wanting to learn. Can we learn this tool? And when they saw the tool, they said, yeah, we can learn it. We would love to learn it. And that's what I meant by democratization. Because the way they're thinking about it, what they've told me is, it's not about whether I can save my job. If my job has to go, my job has to go. But if I can retool myself with this particular, toolkit of AI and machine learning and stuff, my resume becomes so much stronger. So they see it as a big opportunity, at least those that are progressive, to learn this. And the resistance is much less, therefore.
Yeah. So on that note, in terms of democratizing automation and scaling it, obviously COE is one emerging model that is finding a lot of favor. So what are your views on the applicability of having an automation COE, and where should that even exist in the organization?
Well, as I think Sarah pointed out well, there's many different models. And her presentation validated a lot of the journey we've been through, so thank you for that. But for us, the natural place to put it was in our shared service center, which has around 1,000 FTEs handling every kind of process you can imagine, from operations, IT, security, sales, Q&A. It was a perfect place for us to put it because you had everything kind of in one spot. And, you know, it was part of our global operations framework. So for us, that made sense. Whether you do a centralized COE, which we know our centralized strategy is just to get started, eventually it will be a federated kind of model where you've got automation champions around the world kind of working together to leverage best practices. But, you know, for each company, you're going to have to take a look at what makes the most sense for you based on where your operations are and where your talent is.
Donald, what's your view? I mean, you in a way are using some of these COE.
Yeah, our COE is fairly new, and it's actually in the IT organization because the idea was it's going to develop and grow out of IT process and infrastructure. So that's how it's kind of grown, and now we're working at promoting that across the organization. I think the reason we didn't have it in shared services is because of experience, because we saw this as a technology solution first in terms of building the platform and then being able to go out. So it seems to be working right now. I think there is some resistance from business units that say it's not a technology solution, it's a business process. And I say that's semantics. At the end of the day, you want to reduce costs, you want to improve efficiencies. So I think we'll resolve that, whether it stays in IT or not, you know, we'll have to see.
Yeah.
So I think it should be led by operations, supported by IT, right? Versus led by IT, supported by operation. Although all of these tools, they claim that the script of these tools can be written by anyone, and to some extent that is true, and that is why we are democratizing it, but you need a coder's mindset to write these scripts properly. The way I use this, an analogy of is Excel. Right? You know, you can have someone build an Excel sheet and, you know, with a business case or whatever, and a Power Excel user will do a much better job of building a more elegant, cells are logged, they cannot be tampered with, everything is well connected, the formulas are cleanly written. And we've seen that the first implementation that we did, when we looked at the script, there were some basic issues with the script, like extra pause time that wasn't needed. We got some 25% reduction or increase in the speed just by making the script a little bit more eloquent. So I believe that a sketched, you know, a rough model can be built by anyone after some training, but there needs to be some controllership by people who have that coder's mindset, a logical thinking mindset of how to write this script. So it should be supported by IT. The reason I think it should be led by business is because not so much RPA, but when you get into AI, this whole thing we talked about, deterministic versus probabilistic way of doing things, IT, to be honest, does not get that. They want to do it deterministic, and that's the only way they want to do it. So having IT do it, I think IT wants 100% solution, whereas here it is about if I can get 80% of what I need at 20% of the cost, I would rather do that.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, one of the worries that I always think about is when we lose that institutional knowledge. You think, you know, the people that have legacy systems, and, you know, when I was at MetLife and a couple of people from MetLife, there was a lot of legacy systems. And I think that's always the concern, is that when you start automating, you need to be able to document that process. And what I do see, both at the bank that I work with now as well as other companies, is if people are fearing RPA and you lose those resources, you're losing that institutional knowledge, and it makes it more complicated. And I think the coders are great, and you know, and I think it's great to have them, but unless they have those people with institutional knowledge, the implementation time and the benefits are going to be pushed further out with a greater risk. And from a regulatory perspective, the regulators are going to focus on that. You're going to have some person that has no experience in claims processing, writing robotics for claims processing. They're going to be all over that. So I think we have to find the balance, and that's a big challenge.
And I agree 100% with that, and that is why what we had done was an RPA solution when it goes through a same governance process within IT as any other new IT software when that gets implemented. So change control process, security and compliance, how to commission that particular tool, create the help desk for that, all of that, we follow the same process. So IT is governing it like any other IT solution, but it's still led by operations.
And I think part of that maybe perception or wrong perception was driven also by a lot of the tools vendors, and I'm not trying to pick on anyone, but the idea was you just drop it in, it's totally non-intrusive, no changes required in IT, and things will magically get automated, and that's not the case.
No, and that's inefficient also. So I'll give you a simple example. We were automating a process, and so you can of course go through the screen and copy paste from one screen, from one application to another application. Well, there is a database behind it, and a much efficient way to do that is rather than looking at that information on that screen, you just go into the database, pick up that information from database. That's like 60% faster. So so this is intrusive. It's not that it's completely non-invasive. Yes, you're not changing the code of the underlying application, but when you have the IT person in the team, IT person will give you better ways to solve the problem than just the business person.
Yeah. And one other trend we're seeing is in some organizations, they're placing the COE within their process excellence organization, right, which intrinsically may be a better starting point, because process excellence usually is anyway interacting with business and IT and ops to kind of go on this process improvement journey. And ultimately, I think BPM and process improvement should come into play, although, you want to get some tactical gains to automation, but it's also a catalyst or a trigger for doing some BPM work. So that may be a natural fit.
That's how we had it,
yeah,
in the operational excellence group.
Right. So my next question is around, obviously to go along on this journey, you need partners. You need tools, vendors, you need companies that can come and implement. Hopefully you need advisors. So how do you go about building this partner ecosystem to successfully go along this journey?
Well, knowing that most operations have internal, external, multivariable landscape of operations delivery, you've got a lot of resources there that you need to leverage, and you need to think about the whole landscape, not just the internal side of the landscape. So I definitely believe it is a good idea to get some help. Now, you can have a strategy of get some help, set up things, and have implementers or folks doing assessment work come in and train your people so you can eventually take it over yourself. That's a good strategy. Or you can go the managed service route and let somebody else do it for you. But I do think it's a good idea to get some help on the front end to help you through the initial pains of the journey.
But are you looking to work with your existing service partners and see how they can sort of expand their footprint? They already know your organization, et cetera, or do you think it's better to bring in somebody specialist from outside?
The challenge, at least that we had with our third-party providers, was they're using multiple different tool sets. Some of them were creating their own stuff. Some of them were partnering with software companies. And, the thing that is scary from that standpoint is you could get into a situation where, they're not software companies. They're putting a model in place that's not sustainable. Are they going to invest in it every year and keep it up? Are they going to sell it commercially? For the most part, no. It's a one-off solution, and you really don't want to get into that. So kind of what we've done is say, here's the tools we want you to use. Here's the process we want you to follow. And this is a work in progress, by the way. But, go out, automate using kind of the framework we're putting in place. And then, if something ever happens to our relationship, I want rights to the software. I want rights to all the intellectual property and transition services to make sure I'm not left holding the bag, so to speak. So.
Yeah.
So, the one thing that I was thinking is we go out to our vendors, existing vendors, we say we want to tell us the best, the brightest tools to use as long as it's what we tell you to use. So, there's really a challenge to figure that out. But our approach is to look at our vendors, existing vendors, and give them the opportunity. They know our process. We've outsourced a lot of the activity to them as well, but we want them to use a common platform, which is a challenge. If it's going to be Blue Prism versus Kapow versus something else, it can't be perfect. And I think that's the biggest lesson that we've learned is we can't be perfect. And a group came to us and said, Blue Prism is the best thing in the world. I said, that's great, but we can't support it today. So we've got to start with something. So, we started with Kapow, and we're looking at Kapow to, get some better versions, but at some point, if we have to switch things over, it's going to be across the platform because I don't think we can support multiple platforms. We just got out of that environment today. We don't want to go back to it. So it's really depending on our existing vendors, and if they don't step up and do it, then we're going to have to find somebody else.
Yeah. Abhishek?
So I think there are many parts to that question. One is your technology partners, right? And the other is your services partner. Right, professional services. On the technology side, there are, if you double click on that, there are two subparts. One is your RPA partner. All the 3 companies or 4 companies that are at the top, Blue Prism, UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and WorkFusion to some extent, but the 3 typically, they're all pretty much the same. And where there is differences, they're bridging it so fast. I mean, last month one was ahead, then this month the other one is ahead. So it's going to be, it's only a bad. So it's about splitting hair now. So just pick one. Now, you do pick one because I think where the some benefit can be is by letting them compete a little bit because it's the licensing negotiation that you can do. Where you can say that, I'm going to pay you not in the standard way, but I'm going to pay for the cognitive bot the same price that I pay for the regular bot. And they do budget eventually. So use that just for that. Other than that, they're all the same. Pick one, whoever you think is kind of, now there is some differences. Automation Anywhere is more user-friendly for interface versus, so that's not a big deal. The other part of technology is the AI components, which machine learning tools are you using, et cetera, First, you need to create an infrastructure, and you have 3 choices, AWS, Google, and Microsoft Azure, where you create this cloud environment, get GPUs assigned, and after that, don't have a specific tool. It's just open. Whether it's TensorFlow library, whether it's Microsoft has its own, you have to give data scientists freedom to use any library that they can use and eventually convert it into R or Python that you can then deploy. As long as that's there, you should not dictate too much on which library to use because you don't want to, and it doesn't matter. So that's as far as technology is concerned. On the professional services side, what you need is 3 things. You need a provider that can bring really high-level intellectual horsepower. You need a provider that can get you arms and legs, and you need a for capacity. And you need somebody who can do analysis of the business processes and identify opportunities. Right? Those are the 3. The first one, our experience is the best and the most efficient is actually universities. We're partnering with Georgia Tech. They have machine learning centers of excellence. The professor there has been working for 15, 20 years in writing fundamental algorithms. And they're all very interested in giving you a solution. And they've got really bright kids who will work on it, supervised by their professor, at a fraction of a cost than what a consulting firm is going to charge you, and the consulting firm does not have that kind of talent. So that's where the brain can come from. And then over time, obviously, you can hire 1 or 2 if you can, if you have a good brand, if Facebook and Google have left any good data scientists in the market. Then the second piece is arms and legs. For that, deploy a factory model. Whether you go with one of the providers, system integrator provider, outsourcing companies, or whether you go with even a consulting firm like KPMG, EY, you guys, but work in an outsourcing mindset. So we are saying 60%, 70% offshore, 30% onshore, but really it's a factory model. And we'll keep giving you work, you keep kind of building that whole thing. That's the factory model. Now, where the ideas will come from, which is very much a BPM or a process analysis, is train your own people and give them a very solid methodology. That's where the democratization comes in, and give them a sandbox where they can play with these tools, and the ideas really come from that, number one. Number two, we all are hiring consulting firms for various other projects. Whenever you onboard a consulting firm, we would actually tell them that, look, RPA is a lever. You guys are not used to using it, but you have to use it. So whatever process analysis you guys are doing, make sure you check these things so that we can identify opportunities. So that's how I believe the professional services side has to be set up.
Right. Thanks, Abhishek. I'm going to open up for some questions shortly, so you can start thinking about some good questions. My next question to you all is around internal challenges and risks. So maybe starting with you, since you're the king of risk management. What are some of the internal challenges or risks you faced or you feel you might face in this
when
process?
you think about first line, second line, third line reviews for security risk, I think the challenge that I have is getting the other groups. So if you can implement RPA successfully, you have to make sure, especially at a regulated area, whether it's pharmaceuticals or banking, that the groups that do the reviews understand what can be automated. And I think part of the challenge is getting those upstream processes changed, because those are what actually impact us. We're going to automate everything we want, but if auditors come in and they don't understand it, they're going to shut it down. So you can get all the other groups. So they're very important to have that cross-functional group. And I think that's one area that we really have to focus on. The second challenge is how many people here in procurement or sourcing? Okay, so I'll be nice. And I'm part of the sourcing organization, getting the sourcing people to think it's not about FTEs, it's not about the interview process, it's not about cost savings, it's about efficiency. Let's write contracts that allow that. And that's a big challenge, because I got a couple people to really focus on a great contract that's going to be implementation of RPA, and at the end of the contract they turn to the vendor and they say, well, how many people are you going to have? And I said, that's not where we want to go. So changing that has been a big factor as well, because most source organizations are driven by one thing: reducing the cost of the contract, not necessarily increasing the value. But I think that's changing. And that's a big challenge that I have. So it's really the upstream, second line, third line, as well as the sourcing process.
So thinking about risks and challenges, for me, I view RPA as an opportunity to minimize risk. Instead of having regulators come in and interview all your internal and external operations, they really just look at your rule sets that you give the robots to set them up to do the different tasks. And that's kind of a different mindset. And so it's repeatable, sustainable, and it's much more controllable than a bunch of employees doing the same thing. So errors are not as big an issue. So I view RPA as really an opportunity to improve your risk profile. In terms of challenges, for us, part of my challenge is definitely change management. Not only change management from an employee impacted standpoint, but also change management within your leadership. And some folks want to go off and do their own. They don't want to work within a controlled framework. And how do you manage all that and still deliver the priorities that the business needs is probably one of the challenges we're working through from a change management standpoint.
Okay. Well, I'm going to open up for some questions now. We still have about 15, 17 minutes to go. Any questions for the panel here?
I will start with the first question. Do you guys see this whole automation RPA initiative being driven top down in your firms, or is it coming bottoms up? So is there your CEO comes in and says, I had a meeting with the board and you have to figure out how do you change these processes, reimagine and bring in automation, or is it some of your engineers coming out and saying, look, we could do this, why don't we try it out?
Oh, I think I have to say yes for career, to preserve my career. But I think the reality is that I think at a very high level, our executives get it and they understand it. But I think it's more of the hands-on operational people that are really seeing the benefits, and they're really kind of pushing it up more. But I think it's a little bit of both. But I really see more of the operational level people are pushing to do more automation because their budgets are being cut. And they expect the savings. I think senior management says we got to save money and increase efficiency. I don't see them as directing the RPA model as aggressively as they should.
I think till last year it was more bottom up, but all our senior executives, the CEOs and CTOs, they go to these conferences and all they hear is AI. So now it's top down. Now they're getting excited. Look, you guys spoke about some things about robotics. Like, okay, can you tell me what it is? Because we really want to push it. And when they feel confident that you have really figured out a strategy and you are good at it, and when they bring, so in our case, they brought some external advisors in a digital advisory board, and they said, well, this is our AI team. Why don't you kind of see, do they know what they're doing? And the external advisors, they gave us kind of solid rating, and they said, well, okay. So now they get confidence in the team, and they then give you empowerment. So in last 6 to 8 months, I've seen all senior leaders, all major conferences, the percentage of time they're discussing AI has gone up so much that they all have gotten excited. Now, of course, like everything good, there will be a valley of death as well. But so far, they're all overexcited, perhaps.
So, for me, I saw RPA as a ground-up kind of initiative, and you've got a lot of young talent throughout the operations and in finance and other areas playing with robots. We've got interns that have done some stuff on their own because they're excited about it, and so it really started ground up. And the first time we kind of pitched where we want to go with this to our senior leadership team, they were thinking Holmes or Watson or somebody, and we're saying, no, we're starting here. We're creating a COE around automation, but it will be a journey to, at least for us, more of the machine learning and AI. We do have machine learning in place, and we still get hundreds of millions of pieces of mail a year. And so we're doing OCR and some machine learning stuff on that. But still, for me, and some of y'all may not like to hear this, but some of that AI machine learning stuff is still hype, unless you're willing to invest a lot of time and money to make it work.
Yeah, and I think also, we're still in the beginning of this Gartner hype cycle, right, where automation, the buzzword, has caught on so quickly, and the vendors have been pushing it so aggressively that everybody, out of curiosity, has been dabbling. But the buy-in at the senior leadership level is certainly now driving this. And two other aspects of automation and RPA, which I think are driving the executive buy-in. One is operational agility, because it allows you to pivot and ramp up and down as market cycle changes. The other aspect is around disaster recovery and management, which we have seen recently with 2 major hurricanes. Like if you're an insurance firm, you're now going to get a flood of claims coming in. Are you going to go and hire 500 people or go to your vendor, or would you rather have bots spinning that can quickly take on some of that extra load, right? So that aspect also is driving a lot of executive buy-in.
Sorry. I don't think I have to repeat myself.
No,
right?
I heard no one.
Okay. So I find it very challenging now that I'm on the other side to convince procurement to get out of the mind frame of time and material. Obviously, with RPA and artificial intelligence, the mindset has got to change. So do you have any recommendations as to how providers should be approaching procurement so that that mindset changes?
Well, if I could, so a great example is we just kicked off, you know, and when I saw the numbers from Sarah, like I think the accounts payable was like 6%. So we actually kicked off a project that is looking at F&A and the procurement organization, how they can be more efficient. And they're seeing this, all of a sudden they realize, hey, you know, we've been doing these contracts for IT and HR and legal, but now we're looking at their own contracts. So it actually is helping procurement get out of their own way because now they see the value of the benefits to their organization. So it's really kind of a strange thing, and it's the first big automation that we're going to do for accounts payable processing. That seems to be getting people to realize the fact that they're going to eat their own dog food, and it's helping. I don't know other choice.
Yeah, but also they keep going to rate cards. Those rate cards have got to be out of circulation, so to speak, because that does not help the change in mentality.
So, and I've led the entire sourcing organization, right? So my experience was two parts to your question. One is if you're saying the time and material based versus widget based, outcome based, those kind of models are better model, more sophisticated model. The answer is absolutely yes, provided you have ways to measure those other things. In some cases, time and material is the only model because that's how it is. The contract is such. Either way, the case for RPA is solid. You know, even if you look time and material, if you are deploying RPA in a right process, even if you look time and material and the process is somewhat of a good scale, you have a solid case for RPA irrespective. Now, I completely agree that there are lots of other benefits, and for that what we have done is we have created a very detailed value tracking and value management model which captures all of these things. Time savings and cost saving, of course, but also reporting and how much time was reporting taking before and now. Real time versus, you know, monthly reporting. What is the benefit of that? Quantified. Compliance and review. How much compliance and review cost has gone down. Maintenance and upkeep cost. So you can actually make it into a science. Now, some of these will be perfect science where you can really, using an accounting principle, show that this saving is real. Some of it will be slightly gray, but you will have people who are signing off on it, saying that yes, roughly speaking, 20% of my effort has gone down from an audit perspective after RPA is implemented. So I think what companies have not done, and I have not seen it from any consulting firms, and we have spoken to all consulting firms possible, nobody has given us a good value tracking system. We have one internally that I created. And it's not very complicated. It's quite straightforward. So companies need to have a value tracking system rather than saying not every value is hard dollar, some of it is soft. Whatever is soft can also be semi-quantified at least, if not fully quantified.
But it's getting through that cycle of resistance into that area. So I think, you know, I mean, if you talk to vendors, 9 out of 10 are going to tell you at the end of the day they're being pushed on rates and not automation. And I think it's a matter of that there was that fear, and I always go back to the cloud and outsourcing, right? First thing with outsourcing cloud is everyone feared it, so there was a lot of resistance, and then people started understanding it. So I think we're just kind of getting over that curve right now where people are finally understanding that robotics is not about a rate card, and it's not about, you know, counting seats, you know, butts and seats. And I think it's starting to change. So I'm seeing instead of being, you know, 9 out of 10 being, you know, time and materials, maybe it's 7 out of 10, and 2 of them are now being robotics-based or automation-based. Hopefully it gets to 50-50 in the next 2 or 3 years. It took cloud, 10 years before people really accepted the fact. And I still hear people resisting cloud structures. So I think it's just a matter of time, but we have to push the envelope.
But vendors are also using it in a very tricky way. So vendors will come to you and say, look, you are paying me like $10 million for this process, right? And I have whatever FTEs and time and material. How about if I save you $3 million? And if I save you $3 million, you will share first year's savings with me, and then, you know, outcome based, right? Sounds good. Well, it's costing them only $300,000 to create that robotic solution. Why would I share $3 million with them? So you should also be careful of not letting vendors use this as a way to say that, you know, I'll save you money, save first year savings with me. I don't think there's any need for doing that. I mean, they're not doing anything super innovative if it's a straightforward robotic implementation.
Yeah, and to put in a shameless plug here. Well, one of the things we're using when we start engagements is to create this value acceleration roadmap, which sets the right expectations across the organization, across the different business units, that this is what you're going to get. Treat it almost like an outsourcing transaction. When you go and sign a 5-year contract with a vendor, you define certain goals and ROI metrics and so on and so forth. So kind of looking at it from that perspective. And then we create a tool, basically a benefits tracker, which along that journey allows you to constantly track how you're doing against that value acceleration roadmap. So having some of those tools in place, I think at the beginning is very critical so that you don't get into the wrong expectation and have a disappointment down the road.
So, since I'm one of the folks championing RPA and process improvement, it kind of works out well for us because I'm in the sourcing group, and the way we're structured, we source services separately than we do commodity pens and paper, right? So, and we're not measured so much just on savings anymore. It's customer experience, it's risk, it's disaster recovery, it's a whole lot of other landscape of potential benefits. And yeah, they may not equate easily to the bottom line, but they are benefits that make things better for your customers or your operations. So, I feel that bringing the whole picture together in terms of the benefits will help your operations push your procurement team to get on board.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we have time for one more question.
It is very obvious that Abhishek is a very difficult customer to satisfy. That's on a lighter note. Abhishek, what is your experience with the demand management? Now, once you completed certain pilots, some initiatives, I am sure the floodgates would have opened and lots of departments, divisions would have come to you. How did you do the demand management?
So it's very difficult because first challenge was getting started. The second challenge is slowing down because everybody says, all right, I want to do it. And you have what we created was a very well-structured prioritization matrix, which basically looks at the return on investment, how long will this process be needed, is there already a project going on that's going to eliminate this, is the payback within 6 months. That was the criteria. Those were some very simple criteria based on which we decided where to go after. And one of the other thing there is receptivity by the head of that function. If they don't have their heart in it, then we don't want to do that project because there will be hurdles on the road. The other thing we also wanted to do, and that's why I'm saying start bold. Maybe start small, but start bold. We wanted to take a diversity of projects. We don't want all the projects to be similar. We wanted projects where machine learning can be used, where machine vision can be used, where all of these other things can be used, so that in the first year we have a good taste for a variety of things and we know what works and what doesn't work. And many times we failed, and that's perfectly fine. That's okay. But so that's the way we kind of prioritized it, and therefore you need to have the capacity ready. So you have to have your vendor ready with that factory model, so that when these projects come in, you have a very structured method to how funnel them into production. But it's not an easy thing to do.
Okay. So one last question to the panel, and you don't have to answer with direct names if you don't want to, but the automation landscape is evolving very rapidly. We're seeing companies come out with new products, new versions almost every other week. They're tweaking their pricing models. Some are even offering free basic bots. So it's shifting very quickly. There are going to be some winners, some losers. Can you first of all predict any winners? And secondly, what are some of the attributes in terms of their product roadmap or their ability to continue to innovate that will indicate who may be a winner? Because obviously you want to be with someone that lasts through this journey and not just gets swallowed or vanished from the landscape.
So I would suggest you meet with all the potential providers, look at their product roadmap, look at their ability to deliver and the capacity they have. All of these folks are growing at astronomical rates, and they're stretched thin. And so, you know, you need to work with them and find out, are they going to be able to deliver based on the time frames and the expectations that you have? And you can also get, you know, other firms besides just RPA software. But are they easy to work with? Is the pricing flexible? You know, is the product roadmap in line with where you want to go? Is it something that is scalable, and do they support it? So there's, you know, the typical factors you look at when you're buying software truly do apply for RPA.
My view is kind of 3 points. They will all get acquired by somebody. So
That
you know,
too.
True. So once they get acquired by IBM, Microsoft, whatever, you know, whoever you're dealing with and whatever you're dealing with is going to change anyways, right? What will make them, who will be successful? The one that will be successful will be the one that has better AI eventually. And the better AI cannot be done organically. They have to leverage what's out there and integrate currently available AI into their tools seamlessly. And the third biggest factor will be the more user-friendly it is, the interface should be such that anybody can create a rough bot. Whoever will have these two things, better integrated open source kind of an AI and a better user interface, will be the winner. But all of them will get acquired, and the winner will come from as a shoot off of one of the bigger companies like Salesforce, Microsoft, one of these companies. So that's where it's going. So there's no, don't think too much about it.
So, yeah, I think you have to plan, you know, from a risk management, you have to plan for termination transition, that bottom line. You know, just like you have your vendors, the software, you can't depend on it. And I think that's going to be the key. If you are so married to one product, you're in trouble, and your risk management group is going to be all over that. So I think that's the key.
Yeah. And our view is, again, just like what happened with cloud maybe 7 years ago, where it was looked at as this esoteric, you know, model. And now cloud is so endemic. I mean, it's like, it's part of your landscape. You don't even think about it. Automation is going to become just like that. It'll be part of your enterprise software suite. It might even be plugged into all these BPM and other ERP platforms. So I guess to your point, eventually they're going to be acquired by one or the other. So, right? So anyway, I think you all would agree this was a very excellent panel with great insights. Round of applause for our panelists here.